Hello everyone, welcome back. So in the first video, I showed you around in Minitab and its simple graphical user interface. In this video, we are going to see a number of things. So number one is how to transfer data from Excel to Minitab. That's what we're going to look at first. After that, I'm going to show you how to do some row statistical calculations and column statistical calculations. I'm going to show you basic statistics menu and graphical summary over these data sets. All right, let's get started. So in this Excel file, I do have two different data sets. So on the first one, on the first two tabs, the data is the same, but the structure of the data is different. So let's take a look at this first data first. All right. So in this one, I do have multiple different subgroups. I do have 25 different subgroups. So some people tend to call them samples. Some people call them subgroups. So I will be using samples and subgroups interchangeably. All right. Um, and in each subgroup, I do have 5 different operations. So this can be um, a quality control observations, right? So maybe you did observations every day, let's assume for 25 days. And let's say you are producing cars and then you are taking a look at the paint quality of the cars. And let's assume that those are measured anything between 75 to 125. So let's assume that those are maybe the thickness of the paint on the car. And every day you observe randomly selected 5 different cars paint, and then you record them on your spreadsheet. All right. So day one, subgroup one or sample one, I do have 5 different observations. And again, as I said, those are variables. So I'm going to explain what's the difference between variables and attributes in a moment. But let's assume that I do have 25 different days. I collected every day 5 different observations on my randomly selected cars that I produced. I would like to make sure that those are under statistical process control, right? Today's topic is going to be on the next video. I'm going to show you how to make sure that your process is under statistical process control. But before we jump into that, I have to show you the differences between variables and attributes. So as I said here, maybe let's assume that what I measure is the thickness of the paint on the car. It is a variable rather than an attribute because that thickness value can take any value, any fractional value between 75 and 125, right? So let's assume that that's the 75 is the lower specification limit and 125 is the upper specification limit. Okay, so that is if you are, for example, measuring the weight of something, right? And that is still a variable because it can change. It can take potentially infinite amount a number of different observations. So that's also variable. But let's assume that you are just trying to count a successful operation and unsuccessful operation. In that case, that will be attribute type of information that you're collecting. All right. I'm going to explain what it is on a different set, but for now, this data set has variable information that I collected on 25 different subgroups. And every day, or every sample, or every subgroup, I have 5 different observations. And they come from randomly selected different cars, all right? Let's assume that this data set is actually, that's what I have. As you can see, this data contains 25 subgroups, so this is just a simple comment on the side just to remind me what it was. Observations of subgroups are in one row. So this is going to matter a lot when you go to Minitab and try to do some operations in Minitab. Let's take a look at the second worksheet, and then you see that I took these observations, right? For subgroup one, I basically transpose them and then I put it on the second column. So what do I mean by that? So instead of having 5 different observations for each subgroup, what I did here is that, all right, subgroup one, I removed the observation labels. Basically, I just copied the observation values here. And I continued with subgroup two, and The observations are listed here without the observations labels, just the values and the thickness of the paint here. And I continued like this all the way down to subgroup 25. What's the difference between this one and this one? Well, there's no difference. The data values are the same, but sometimes your people, your workers or yourself tend to keep your data in this structure, and sometimes you tend to keep your data in this structure. Well, Minitab can handle both structures. You just need to know where to click, right? So that's why I'm showing you two different representations of the same data so that whichever format you have, you can still do the operations. All right, let's go to the third tab. And this is completely different example. We do have features. We do have several different shipments coming from, let's say, our suppliers, and we are producing peach juice, right? That's one of my favorites. And then we do have, again, 25 shipments. Let's assume that we collected these shipments and then we randomly selected 25 different peaches from each shipment. And this is our sample size or subgroup size, right? And every time we inspected them, we note down the number of bruised peaches that comes with each sample. On the first shipment, I collected 25 subgroups from that first shipment, and then I realized that 47 of them was bruised, right, or defective, right? And then I did the same thing second day. I noted that it is 42. Third day it was 55. Fourth day it was 51, so on and so forth. Okay, so in this case, I'm not really measuring any variable. I am just categorizing my products into being defective or non-defective or successful, right? Or you can just say failure and success or defective, non-defective. These are different categories that you can have. Well, if you have that distinct categorization in your data, then it means that you are actually working on attributes rather than variables, all right? That is important because that's going to tell you which quality tool you will be using in Minitab for simple operations. All right, so that's good enough for introducing my data sets that I have. So let's see how we can transfer all these data sets into Minitab on the next video.